pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now call this meeting of the Fairfield Town Council to order. First order of business are public announcements. Details may be found at www.fairfieldme.com. Absentee voting for MSAD 49 school budget election is August 30th through September 6th. Nomination papers are available and due on September 6th for the November municipal election. There are seats for Town Council, MSAD 49 School Board, and Kennebec Water District. Summer concerts in the park are held each Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. from June through August. I'm going to assume that that means that this week is the final concert in the park?
Yes.
I would encourage people to attend. The second order of town business is public hearings. The first public hearing is to hear from the public on the following proposed town charter amendment. It says, shall the town approve a charter amendment to Article 3, Section 304, Paragraph B, to read as follows. Vacancies in the office of Maine Administrative School District number 49 board members shall be appointed by the town council to serve until the next annual municipal election, and striking out the phrase for the unexpired term. This public hearing is now open. Does any member of the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, this public hearing is now closed. Third order of business, public comments. Members of the public may speak to the council on any item or reserve the right to speak on a specific item that is on the meeting agenda when the item is addressed. And these comments are limited to 3 minutes. Does anybody from the public wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, we will move on to the fourth order of business. Reports from staff and committees. We'll begin with the town manager report.
So just to update you on a few projects, the contract for streetlight conversion has been signed at just over $169,000. This is preliminary until the full audit is complete, because we had to assume that all of them would use smart technology, and we know that's going to be scaled back. The process of buying the lights from CMP has started, and the conversion work is set to begin in October. Excellent. The final draft of the land lease with US Cellular is complete. Final review has started between myself, and will be sent off to the town attorney for a secondary review, and it's tentatively scheduled for your first meeting in September for that piece for you to approve. And then also for the project that's going on Savage and West Street, so folks are aware that Kennebec Water District has contracted with Nitram Excavation to replace the existing 12-inch 1905 vintage cast iron water main with a new 12-inch ductile iron pipe. They have started work with installing the temporary line, so if you drive down West or Savage Street, you're going to see blue pipes on the side of the road. That's the temporary water line, where they will be hooking in houses to run temporarily while they install the new main. They will start next week installing the new main. Individuals could expect temporary outages. Anybody who should be experiencing an outage is supposed to be personally notified by Nitram at least 24 hours in advance to let them know of that. And the outages are meant to be short term. They shouldn't last very long throughout the course of the day. It's just a matter of switching pipes from one connection to a new connection. They plan to complete the install project around mid-October, and with the final site work being completed in the spring, when they will redo the lawns and those sort of pieces. And this project is being done ahead of the schedule with the project that the municipality has with DOT, which is a 50-50 partnership for us to actually do a rebuild for West and Savage Street. And this gets this line replaced so that they don't have to come back afterwards. And this area has actually been the site of quite a few water main breaks over the last couple of years, so hopefully that will fix that situation for this winter. But if anybody has any questions on that project, please feel free to contact us at the town office. We can get you in touch with the water district, or at least contact the Kennebec Water District, and they can answer those questions. And that is it for me, and I have no committee reports. The Economic Community Development Committee will not meet until next week.
Okay. And just for being thorough. Are there any other committees that wish to report at this time? Seeing none. We'll move on to the fifth order of business, to waive the reading of and accept the minutes as printed or amended for meeting number 2019-14 held on August 14th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I just want to say it's mellifluous to have it be 2019-14 held on 14/2019. So, that being said, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? One abstention, that motion carries. The sixth order of business is to approve the treasurer's warrant number 12 in the amount of $330,190.53.
So moved.
Second.
So motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? That motion carries. The seventh order of business is to take action on the following items of business. So item number 19-82, order the Fairfield Town Council hereby approves the charter amendment question as written to be printed on municipal ballot at the next regular municipal election to be held on November 5th, 2019.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? And I
One
will
thing.
recommend the manager.
As written, I believe there actually should be an S on the end of School District 49 Board member.
There absolutely should be, and I actually read it that way
Yeah.
originally, so let's get that fixed. I will just move to amend it so that it says members as opposed to member. Is there a
Yeah.
second on that?
Second.
Motion and a second to amend. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of amending? All right, that passes, and we are on back to the main motion of the amendment itself. Is there any further discussion on the amendment as amended?
No.
All right, seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? That motion carries. The next item is item number 19-83, order that the town council hereby approves and appropriates $5,348 for fire station renovations to be expended from the fire department capital reserve account.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Just wanted to, Michelle, was there any abatements done? Because since all this tile and other stuff was back in the 50s, I worried about asbestos and lead.
There was no need for any
Okay.
asbestos or lead
All right,
abatements
this
to be done.
All right.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? That motion carries. Item number 19-84. Order that the town council hereby considers applicants for appointments to fill 3 MSAD 49 school board vacancies for a term set to expire on election day, November 5th, 2019. Now, because under sort of rules of order, it's not really appropriate to have an empty motion where we just move nothing. Instead, if the council will allow it, I'm going to briefly entertain a workshop where we can discuss freely, and then I will consider any motion for a nomination of a specific person to be in order at any time during the discussion. If that's acceptable, I would
Yes.
open the floor to a workshop-style discussion at this point. So if people have ideas, we can talk about them, and I want to let the public know that in keeping with the nature of Maine's open meetings law and our desire for transparency, there have not been substantial discussions on this issue among the councilors up to this point. So you're going to see democracy played out here. So do we have ideas that we want to start with? I will first note that we did receive a message from former school board member Terry Mishu, who had been seeking a appointment, that he has withdrawn his application, and I do want to thank him for being willing to serve. I know it's
Too bad.
takes a lot to step up right now
Yeah.
to do this job, so I'm glad
It's
that,
too bad. It was a very strong voice for the board in the past.
so with that, we do have, I believe, still 5 other applicants. Thoughts?
I haven't been able to get into my email since I got my new computer.
Oh,
So, have
Okay.
any of the me with my computer science degree. I'll figure it out tonight, though.
I think you have in your council packet
Yeah.
at least their resumes if you want to.
Sounds good. Have any of them served before?
So I believe Mr. Kinley has served previously, and is there anybody else on the list who has previously served? I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of
No,
former
just-
school board service.
Just Mr. Kinley's only one of my knowledge, since I've been in the area for like over 20-something years.
Because I do know that that would be something that would help, especially with recent events, is if they've served before, at least in my mind.
I will
There's a-
say, one application that particularly stood out to me is Beth Lambert. I think she has
She works at Department of Labor, Department of Education.
Department of Education, she has significant credentials in education.
Mhm.
And I did receive actually received a communication from a resident that also works at the department, in the Department of Education, commending her work and
There's one on-
expressing support for
There's one
her.
on the board right now that I think works for the Department of Education.
Her resume is definitely really impressive.
Also, too, we need a strong leader that has a education background, too. I saw that into Ray Folsom's resume and application, since she was works with special ed.
Mhm.
Former coaches for Lawrence and Waterville and the PAL program. So
Yep.
she knows the ins and outs of education and the sports league too, so.
Yes.
Okay.
And since we have at least discussed 3 of the applicants,
Yeah,
perhaps it would make sense to just
And also too, I
run
know,
through the list and see where
since,
we are.
I know what happened with the current events leading up from January to now, especially April.
Mhm.
I couldn't say anything since my spouse, my wife, was on the board,
Great,
and now she's resigning off the board. I can say something.
okay.
I know who were the leaders were that went into trying to help the budget where it is now. And the budget right now is out of proportional right now. Way back for the 20-some years with the Dean Baker area. So we just need new voices, not anyone with Dean Baker's philosophy or knowledge. So we just need someone that is there for the student body, the staff, and administration to lead them to the next level. So,
Right. So on the issue of new voices, I mean, obviously other than Mr. Kinley, nobody else
I like
has served.
Beth Lambert, Ray.
I would definitely agree on Beth Lambert.
All right.
She seems like a very
Yeah.
solid applicant.
So I did want to say the other two applicants are Christina Quinlan and Judy Reeves, both of whom are not currently affiliated with the school.
Right.
They certainly provide say potentially outside
Right.
voice. They're not
We need-
in the education
We
system
need
currently.
leaders, not followers, of the current events.
I think everybody who has stepped up to say in this climate that they would want to serve on the school board is certainly demonstrating a desire for leadership,
Right.
because I can't imagine anybody who wants to follow along is willingly stepping into this role right now. And I respect the experience that you have had with this situation more personally, and I'm sure you know that nobody who was doing this who didn't have, I think, a strong will to
Just,
see this done would
they also
step
too,
up.
the diversity of personnel too.
Mhm.
So, because we have another diversity person come out to apply and things like that. So we just gotta be careful on anything like that.
Okay. So, since we seem to have a sort of strong strong positive opinion, it seems sort of around the table on Ms. Lambert's application, do we want to take that up as a nomination first, and
Yes.
then we can figure out what we're gonna do with the other two spots? Is that
Sure.
where we're leading?
Correct.
That's fine.
So at this point, I would entertain a nomination.
I nominate Beth Lambert to fulfill one of the vacancies on the school board.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second for Beth Lambert. Is there any further discussion specifically on Ms. Lambert's nomination? Seeing none, all in favor of Ms. Lambert filling the unexpired, or the term until November 5th as one of our appointed school board members, all in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstaining? That carries. So that leaves 2 positions and 5 remaining applications. And I,
4.
yes, sorry, 4.
What?
Scared me over there.
I do want to make sure that we seriously consider each application. We've talked about the qualifications for 3 of the applicants. I would like to, if we can, look at Ms. Quinlan's application, and then we'll look at Ms. Reeves, and then maybe we can,
It's, coming up, what we have to remember is that, of course, they're going to be looking at a forest superintendent and whatever, and having spent time on the school board. I was actually on the school board when we hired Ed Fabian, and so it was a couple of years ago. But no, it's going to be a task, and it's a very difficult task, and you have to sit down. It's just time consuming, and it's going to take a lot of effort.
and one thing I do wonder on that is a diversity of experience in the people that we appoint. That if we have people who clearly have a lot of experience in education and as school board member, but ultimately, do we feel like the most important thing is to get people who understand the educational system, or do we feel like it's important that we give a sort of broader voice? Now, we have one person that we have now nominated and appointed who has very clear credentials in that area.
Right.
Do we want to look at people who also have
Just,
a sort of general community interest as taxpayers and
we should look at as a person as a whole, that understands the whole structure and every single aspect of the school board, right from education, finance, and sports. All 3 of them tie in with Lawrence, with Side 49. So anyone without the education experience might be, have to have a jumping in and trying to tread the water, trying to understand the system.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what happened when I was elected. And I feel that bringing in an outside voice like that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The job that I have now, I told him in my job interview, I'm not qualified for this job, you understand that? And he said, yes, but I like the way you handle stress and I want to train you. And they brought me into the company even though I had no experience anywhere near the area of scheduling, but they like my IT experience, they like my experience with working with people, and thank you for the class that you sent me to, verbal judo, that was really great. They love that. So it's not bad for somebody to not have experience in education or sports or anything like that. If they care about the kids and they care about the betterment of the school as a whole, then they're gonna bring all they've got to the table, and that's what we need to think about. And because I'm great with segues, I like that Christina Quinlan actually has done a lot in a leadership role. And I think that we should talk about her because she's actually pretty impressive. If you look at, even though it's medical, it's not necessarily related, the healthcare industry is just as difficult as the education industry, if you think about it, because it's just as stressful, it's just as varied from day to day. And I think if she can handle being a consultant and working in the healthcare industry and still managing to be doing it after 22 years, I think that she is a very strong individual and deserves just as much of a chance as anyone else who has been in education.
I would also similarly point out Ms. Reeves has a work history in the health system as well as a geriatric nurse, and apparently has a broad range of experiences in providing service, and also has had a recent graduate from our school system. So she obviously has, strong connection to the community in that way, and is invested in its success. So, and I think every applicant is invested in the success of this enterprise. I think that's the.
I think at this point you have to be.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, in terms of looking at people who have relevant experiences and aren't necessarily as educators or as administrators in the education system, I do think that these are strong applications as well. So now that we've sort of done at least a few words about each applicant, do we have any other sort of strong opinions? I mean, we do ultimately have to make 2 more nominations, so we do have to make decisions. That's what we are elected to do.
Well, I personally would like to nominate Christina Quinlan because I feel that she would be a very good addition to the team. The board.
Is there a second? I will second that. Now, this sounds like it may ultimately run into the situation of why I like to do these things with full council. But this has to be done, and we will have to make tough decisions, and votes can fail on a tie. So, is there any further discussion specifically about Ms. Quinlan's application? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Any abstaining? So that fails on the tie. I am going to, at this point, nominate Judy Reeves. And is there a second for that nomination?
Second.
Is a second. Is there any further discussion on that point? I just want to say that I would like to see us appoint somebody who is a sort of community stakeholder, not just people who are sort of already within our state's educational system. I think that experience is important, and community stakeholding experience is also important. And since Ms. Quinlan's nomination was not successful, I would like to see if we can get that through Ms. Reeves' application. So with that, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? So that carries. Which leaves us with one position left to fill, and technically under the rules of order, a motion that has been made and failed is not really in line to be revisited unless somebody who voted in the prevailing side, which in the case of Ms. Quinlan's nomination would be the no side, chooses to ask for reconsideration. So in keeping with the spirit of the rules of order, even though it's technically a separate nomination, I don't foresee that it will come out differently on another vote. So I would actually, at this point, unfortunately, rule it out of order unless Councilor Lawrence or Councilor Prashadi are choosing to make that motion. So we have two remaining viable applications and one spot. And I apologize, I've seemed to be becoming allergic to something as we say.
It's been,
So is there strong preference between the remaining candidates?
I'd like to take up employee Ray Folsom's.
Okay,
Next.
there's a motion.
I'll make a motion to,
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a second. Is there further discussion on this application? So, as it is your nomination, do you want to sort of make a pitch for it, or you feel like you've said enough?
I said enough in the opening that she is a strong leader in all aspects, education and the sports side of the house, on PAL and both Lawrence and Waterville High School.
All right. Anyone else have any thoughts on this this nomination? Seeing none, all in favor? 3 in favor. Any opposed? And any abstaining? That motion carries. All right, so that concludes the nominations for the open school board positions. Congratulations to everybody who was appointed today, and I want to thank everybody who applied. Everybody who steps forward to try and make our community better is, in my mind, fighting for the same team. So thank you all.
Well, we do have an election coming up, and these
Yes.
people are on the ballot.
All of these positions will be up for election
Very wide
in,
open.
frankly, a matter of weeks. So if you are either a candidate who came here today, or a viewer at home who is disappointed with the results, you have an opportunity to change this.
That's correct.
So, and I encourage
Everyone has a
everybody,
voice.
Yep.
everybody to come out and vote in this upcoming election. It is going to be a very important one. All right. So now we will move on to order that the town council hereby signs the MSAD 49 district budget referendum election warrant to be held on September 12th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Very much apologize. Is there any discussion? So I think at this point, we all know what we're doing on this. It is to get this on the ballot so that we can see what the public will do with the proposed budget. All in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? That motion carries. Thank you. I know that this trick has doomed the careers of other politicians, but I'm going to do it anyway. Item number 19-86, order that the town council hereby signs the warrant for a special town meeting, municipal election, to be held on November 5th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, and this is, of course, to approve the election that we are encouraging everybody to take part in, either as a candidate or as a voter. So is there any further discussion?
Everybody should go register to vote.
Excellent, and I will recognize the clerk to
So I
give us some
want to
information.
carry forward the amendment to the first page that we add as to members for the cover page for that warrant.
All right, so we need a motion to amend the warrant to conform to the amended amendment.
I'll make a motion, we make an amendment to an amendment.
All right. So I will take this, unless there is objection, to be a motion to amend the warrant to conform to our previous amendment.
Yes.
Is there any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? All right. So now I'm going to try and count the number of times we're going to have to say the word amendments to restate the motion.
Okay.
So, we are now ordered that the town council hereby signs the warrant for a special town meeting as amended to be held on November 5th, 2019, and that is the motion now as amended. Is there any further discussion on this, this topic?
No.
Seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? That motion carries. We'll now move on to the eighth order of business, the council workshop and other business. The first item is to discuss mill rate and use of undesignated fund balance.
You're up.
So if you'd like to just give us an overview, I know you sent us some numbers.
So as discussed at your last meeting, we did some preliminary workups with what the tax commitment could look like for this year. As I had stated in my memo, the numbers that we are currently using right now is what is the known municipal budget, the known county budget, and the budget that is being put forth by the school for tomorrow evening's budget meeting. So that's the number that we used, with the anticipation that that would be the number, or could be the number, that would be passed at September 12th. And we would do the tax commitment following that election. So that being said, we ran, I provided you with 4 scenarios. I ran many, but the 4 scenarios that I gave you, one is one in which the mill rate stayed the same. And we used 0 funds from the undesignated fund. And just let me back up a little bit. It is important to remember that revenue sharing for the town of Fairfield is projected to be $25,000 more than what it was last year, which is the reason why we actually have the ability to do this budget with the numbers currently presented. Even with the school's current budget projection, which is up $245,000 over last year, we would still be able to keep the mill rate absolutely the same and not use anything from the undesignated fund. So all things being equal. However, we do have sufficient funds in our undesignated fund, and as we have told people in years past, we did not use undesignated fund because we did not have the funds. There are funds there. The preliminary budget has come, preliminary audit for this past fiscal year has come in that says that there are even more funds there than what there were last year. So it would be safe to know that we would still have 3 months worth of operating, which the fact that we currently don't have a budget for the school and tax commitment is a perfect explanation as to why you need 3 months of money in your account and to use some of those funds. So we used $100,000 from the undesignated fund, and what kind of impact that would have on the overlay.
Explain what an overlay is.
So what the overlay is, so in order to do, when you do a tax commitment, it's because of the fact that you need to raise a certain amount of money, Okay, so you have to take the amount you need for the municipality, the amount you need for the county, and the amount you need for the school. So you have all those expenses. Then you have revenue, so the municipality generates revenue, so we, through various different sources, whether it be the school, so when the school does too. So when the school sends the municipality a bill, it takes the revenue that it receives from the Department of Education and automatically subtracts it from the assessment. So we do that process, the municipality does that process in the tax commitment process. So you have funds from the state, you have funds from excise tax with car registrations, we use everything. The agent fees for dog licenses, hunting, fishing licenses, the fees that are generated when somebody buys a used culvert from Public Works, all of that revenue, so all that revenue that we say that we're going to use in the town report when we do town meeting, that's in the back of the book, all that gets counted. So then you have your final numbers. So those numbers combined, minus your revenues, equals the amount you have to raise for property taxes. So you have to take the value of all of the homes in town, minus their exemptions, homestead, veterans, what have you, and you have to multiply that by a number, the mill rate, to generate your property tax number. Well, that never comes out even. It never ever comes out even. There's always a remainder. You'll always generate probably a little bit more than what you need to. State law caps the amount that you can raise more than what you need to at 5%. So municipalities who say their undesignated fund is negative, they're gonna look to make sure that they have an overlay, oftentimes a little bit higher than what they would need to have, because it helps build their undesignated fund. Fairfield's history I've looked at because I was looking at that towards a guide, what kind of mill overlay have we had in the past. It usually ranges anywhere between 1 and 2.5%. It's never a lot. Sometimes you have to gauge too whether or not, overlays are also used to fund abatements. So say there was a mistake in somebody's property tax assessment and they requested an abatement, which means we had to refund money back to them. That refund comes from that overlay account. So when you have large corporations and municipalities and you have a big number that's going to come in for value, sometimes municipalities will make sure they have a healthy overlay just in case there's an assessment dispute. That doesn't happen until after the tax commitment. We don't really have anything like that going on. So what I tried to do was keep the overlay somewhere in the neighborhood of what it has been. So whether it be 1%, 2% in there. What you don't want to do is have a number, you have your mill rate so tight that your overlay is $1,000 because 3 mistakes on 3 different pieces of property could actually chew up all of that. Okay, so you don't want it to be that close. But it's not used typically as a budget builder. It's not a supplemental thing. Sometimes councils will say we want to have a 3%, set the mill rate, but have a 3% overlay. But in this instance, if you noticed in some of the explanations I gave you, there were some of these instances where we used $100,000 in undesignated fund, but it just put $100,000 back into the overlay. So, I mean, it creates a false mill rate. It wasn't something that was sustainable. I mean, you could use $400,000 and drop the mill rate way down. You're just gonna build a huge overlay and have to put it all back in. And then next year, if something happens and you don't have that flexibility, then your mill rate jumps right back up.
Okay.
So what we prepared were scenarios which we thought were definitely sustainable based upon current revenue sharing numbers, current revenue numbers, the fact that revenue sharing is slated to increase from 3% this year to 3.75% next year, the fact that the undesignated fund balance not only was healthy enough last year for us for this budget cycle to know that we could use up to $400,000. But knowing that our audit is predicting a $700,000 increase over last year, so that also makes it healthy. So I think using some of your undesignated fund would be wise at this point because you told the municipality you would use it when you had it. I mean, that's just me. So the scenarios I have provided was using none from the undesignated fund. The mill rate stayed the same. gave you a 2.112 overlay, which was $182,000, a little bit over that. You could use $100,000 from the undesignated funds. There would be a 2/5 mill rate decrease to 22.4 or 0.0224. That's a 1.45 overlay at 100, just over 139.
Is it 4.5 or 5.4?
5.4. Did I
Okay.
say 4.5? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Mhm.
And then you could do 100,000 with half a mil decrease, which would put you at 22.3 for an overlay of just over 103,000. And then you could do 200,000 from the undesignated fund, which has a 3/4 mil impact on the mill rate, brings it down to 22.05. It's a 1.175 overlay, which puts 114,422 back in. So that refunds approximately 58% it back into the undesignated fund. Based on the current stance of the undesignated fund balance, it's a completely plausible scenario for you to do that, and any one of these scenarios would be sustainable. Now, all of that being said, that's on the basis that all of the numbers that we used, meaning the current projected school budget, the municipal and the county, stay exactly the same.
Mhm.
Any deviation in those numbers can obviously change your bottom line.
Yeah.
So I did have a question with respect to the scenario 3 using 100,000 but having a larger mill decrease, the half mill decrease. It looks like, so the projected overlay is only just under $4,000 more than what we're spending from the undesignated fund. Is this to say that, I mean, we always end up abating some amount of property tax, and we're in reality looking at dipping into that and not fully replacing the undesignated fund?
Right, so it's kind of one of those things where we can't predict whether or not there'll be any abatements or not. I mean, we don't always know.
Right.
Any scenarios would that hurt us in the long run?
Well, of course, anytime that you take funds from your undesignated fund, that decreases that number. Okay, so can I say whether it hurts you? No, I mean, we're talking about difference of, it's not even quite an $80,000 decrease in the undesignated
Okay.
fund.
Yeah, I actually prefer scenario 4.
I do too.
To me, makes much more
Yeah,
sense.
we need for it to the taxpayers and the residents.
Yep.
My only concern with scenario 4 is if we don't have the undesignated funds to replicate that next tax season, that everybody's not gonna be ready for the increase in the mill rate again. Whereas with either scenario 2 or 3, it wouldn't be as much of a hike back up to what it was.
No, you've still got a good amount of money going into the overlay, so it's, to me, scenario 4 is the path to take.
I like scenario 2 because it gives us about, what does that make it, almost $40,000 worth of a cushion if there's any abatements, if the school budget changes, if the county budget changes, it's not gonna affect us as
Yeah,
much.
In scenario 4, I calculated it would be a savings of $270,000 of getting extra money from the residents.
So, I mean, I've always been sort of, I guess, notoriously hawkish on the question of undesignated fund spending. One thing that has occurred to me in all of this is, right now, yes, we do have that money, our undesignated fund is healthy. However,
Something might happen.
thinking back to my first year on this council, we had to, in fact, have a very significant debate about spending from the undesignated fund at times when it wasn't as healthy, because there was real economic emergency, that really the tax rate was, the cuts in revenue sharing at that time.
Well, it was due to the cuts in revenue
Right,
sharing,
and-
basically.
And we were in the midst of a sustained economic recession that, for a lot of people, really hasn't ended, even if the Dow Jones suggests otherwise. That having a healthy undesignated fund that we can use for extraordinary relief in emergencies is important. So it's, I think, in my mind, giving a more moderate a more moderate form of tax relief right now can help cushion the blow when we're looking at the next time state revenues are down and they decide to take them from us. So if we see these numbers are sustained over a course of years, and we are looking at, and obviously that's going to be a decision, I think, for people other than me, but if over a course of years, this looks like a sustainable way of spending, a more aggressive way to reduce taxes, that might be more appropriate then. But my concern is that we sort of do the big tax holiday now and then discover at some point in the future that we can't sustain that. Whereas if we ease into that sort of budgeting, I don't want to see there being I don't ultimately want to see there being a huge swing on either side of this, because it affects stability. Like we talked about last time, if people's taxes artificially dropped a mil this year and then went up a mil next year, there's going to be a lot of people who are sort of stuck in the lurch when they didn't prepare for that increase. I don't mind at all using the taxpayers' money to help offset their taxation. That's certainly a legitimate thing to do. But in a climate of uncertainty, I'm not sure that aggressive tax reduction is the best strategy. So I'm inclined to agree with Councilwoman Chandler on looking at scenario 2 and possibly scenario 3, but for my case, scenario 4 is too aggressive.
Just a small case in point, and why, I mean, there's a lot of people who say municipalities keep saying revenue sharing, and we're beating a dead horse, but revenue sharing is supposed to be at 5%. And remember, we did get a small increase this year, and it did bring it back to 3%, but the law does say 5%. And at 5%, revenue sharing would have been more than $1.1 million. That's how much revenue we would have received as a municipality. And that's the kind of revenue that municipalities were receiving before the revenue sharing fund was rated for other purposes. So when Chairman Robbins stated the fact that we need to be prepared for when these state pieces go away, it is true, and it is proven by the recent raids on sharing, so revenue sharing. So this year at 3%, we're going to get $704,000. So that is why you want to be careful when you start looking at, yes, it's great that we have a healthy undesignated fund, but it wasn't that long ago where this municipality did not have a healthy undesignated fund, because it did just that. It continued to use it to allow for lower mill rates or sustain mill rates when you had expenditures that were not sustainable at that rate. And it's a cautionary tale that you would tell to everyone to be very careful of, because it's never a safe and happy place to be. It is good, though, right now, because of what is going on with the municipality, well, the school district, to know that we're still able to make payroll without having had to have done tax commitment. Not all of the municipalities are like that. Some municipalities either had to, or they had to take out TANs, tax anticipation notices, to get loans in order to pay their bills. Because our undesignated fund balance is healthy, we have been able to do that. Right. The pressure is on for your tax commitment simply because of the fact that your second payment on taxes is due at a date certain in November. And we'd really like to make sure that the first payment is due before the second one is. So that's where that's at.
Yeah, it's the point of, we'll just have to wait and see what the voting takes place and how that budget goes through and where we're at that point in time.
I was going to ask that I think we've discussed before that it is possible that we would have to have a special council meeting if something does change dramatically with the school budget between now and the validation referendum process.
So the process we're looking at right now is that, one, we will have a really good idea whether or not the school number that we've used is going to be the number that's going to the voters after tomorrow evening, of course. Mm-hmm. And what we're looking to do is potentially bring this back to the council at your next meeting in September which of course is the night before the election. But to know that if that is the number that goes forward, you can make a decision on what you want to take from the undesignated fund balance at that time based upon the election.
Right.
Either way, we're going to have to pick a number as soon as that election's over. If it passes, great, that's the number we use. If it doesn't pass, we're gonna have to look at a number, and we're gonna be working on that scenario this week of what we would need to do in order to actually get taxes committed, and what will happen if that number isn't quite right, should these votes continue to go forward. But we'll hopefully be able to have everything that you need for answers so that you can make a decision at your next meeting to say, take up to X from the undesignated fund, or set the mill rate, you know, whatever you need to do to get the mill rate at Y or whatever. But this was just to kick off that conversation, and we'll get more in depth for a decision at your next meeting.
So we still have the opportunity to deal with this before it's a crisis.
Yes.
After we've digested this information.
Yes. Yes, we still have some time.
Yep.
Excellent. Is there any further discussion on the proposed use of a designated fund? Seeing none, we can move on to the next workshop item, which is discussing a consent agenda. And our clerk was kind enough to put together a model consent agenda. This is something that I had seen used in other boards and municipalities, both here and away. And in essence, it's been my observation that for the most part, the Fairfield Town Council does not have a, at least recent history of particular acrimony. We're pretty businesslike. Most of the things we do are things we've heavily workshopped. We have an understanding of what it is we want to do by the time we take it up in a future meeting to vote. And the consent agenda would basically be an opportunity for us to move by one motion and pass unanimously those things which we traditionally pass unanimously. Minutes, warrants, stuff that we've, you know, procedural, like approving the referendum. So in the model that Christine made for us, there were 4 action items. Well, I think this was there's one on there that doesn't look like we actually did today, but
We didn't, it was removed.
all right.
Yeah.
You can see that something.
Yep.
As an example
Yes.
of what
So,
a
but-
model would look
Right.
like.
Yes, so in this instance, there were, 4 action items on this model agenda. Of those, 3 of those were things that passed unanimously. One of
Yes.
them is something that, and we would expect it to pass unanimously, one of them is something that may have discussion or debate. Any member, either prior to the meeting or if necessary at the start of the meeting, could simply signal they want to remove something from the consent agenda, and it would go on as a normal action item.
Right.
This would just, rather than having a series of votes, we would have one vote on things that are procedural or we don't feel collectively are particularly controversial.
No, it makes sense.
The safeguards that I would personally put in place around that is nothing that is on the agenda for the first time would ever be a consent agenda item. So if,
Right.
in the instances where we have had things that are time sensitive, that we either didn't get a chance to workshop or, somebody brings up and need to be acted on, those would always be normal discussion items. But if we've workshopped it, there wasn't any opposition at the workshop, it was something we just wanted to put forward, and we didn't feel like there was going to be substantial further discussion, put it on there, and if any member for any reason feels like they want to discuss it further, they're welcome to do that, and it would come right off. If this is something that we want to try out, I would certainly be willing to entertain doing our next meeting with this model in place and see if we like it.
I'd like to see it done.
Okay.
And just as a note, so on this one, what was an exception was we had taken the minutes off the consent agenda piece because not all of you were present at the last meeting. So that would not, if you were going to be someone who was going to abstain from voting on that one item, we wouldn't include that, or we knew, say there was a known conflict of interest for an item, we would take that off as
Yeah.
well. So that way it wouldn't be one of those things where you wouldn't just abstain from the whole collective because of the one item.
Right, and I think that's important.
Makes
as well.
sense, yeah.
The one thing I would say as counselors, we should already be doing this, and I truly believe that we all are, but it does require that we proactively look at our agendas ahead of time and make sure that we know if there's an issue of controversy or a conflict of interest beforehand.
Right.
So, but obviously, some conflicts are just known, and we would be able to pull those things, and I would expect that whoever is chairing the meeting or any member would be conscientious enough to raise concerns ahead of time.
Yep.
All right, so I think we'll try that out at our next meeting. I will make sure that Councilwoman Busk is aware that we're going to be doing that. And then hopefully that will bring us some efficiency. All right. That leads us to discuss other council business. Mr. Lawrence, do you have anything further to discuss?
I do. I received an email the other day from window dressers, because I mentioned that before in a council meeting. This is an update on when they're actually going to be hold their annual event. Everything has to be in by September 16th for measurements. And this year, the Fairfield Community Build will be at the Victor Grange in Fairfield from October 18th to the 27th. They're looking for volunteers to help out, or if you need any windows made, just contact, there's a website here, or contact Barbara with a phone number. This email, I will provide this email to the town clerk so she can print it off and hang it up and things like that.
Okay.
Excellent.
And that's it.
All right. Councilor Pashadi?
No, good.
Councilman Chandler?
Nothing for me tonight.
All right. And I just wanted to say happy birthday to Joe Rowden, who's my father, and previously served on the town charter committee for our current charter, and his birthday, so I wanted to wish him well.
I have one thing for you.
All right.
So, Officer Bullier is here this evening. This will be his last shift to cover a council meeting. He will be leaving us at the end of the month for retirement, and wanted to make sure he got an opportunity to come in and say hello, and the council had an opportunity to thank him for his service to the community.
How many years?
I've been here for 18 years.
18 years.
Altogether 27, over 27 years.
Thank you very much
you.
for your service and providing us security. It's greatly appreciated.
The honor's all mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Billy.
Thank you. Is there any other business to discuss at this time?
Almost set.
Seeing none. The next regular meeting of the Fairfield Town Council will be Wednesday, September 11th, 2019. At this time, the council will recess and sign all documents that require the signature of council members. Is there a motion for a
So
recess?
moved.
Second.
So motion and a second. If there is no objection, we are in recess.